I'm not light, but I travel light, and so this is my multimedia presentation here. This looks to you, I'm sure, like an ordinary empty Diet Pepsi bottle, but it is, if you will, one of those magic bottles, those genie in the bottle magic bottles. And so, if I were to open it and imagine if the genie were to pop out, and this genie only gives you one wish, but it isn't. It's like a lot of college courses, it's multiple choice. You can't just wish for anything, and you can't wish for anything for yourself. You have three choices and you have to pick one of them. And the genie says, okay, here are your three choices. One, you can put a stop today to climate change. It will just stop. All of a sudden, carbon will not have the impact on the climate, and everything will go back to kind of, if you will, normal, kind of normal in the sense of the constant change that is part of our ecosystem, but which proceeds most of the time in a fairly gradual way. Or, number two, and you can't pick all of the above, number two, you can instantly put a halt to the tremendous wave of species extinction around the world. There are thousands of species, plant and animal species, that are threatened and endangered, and of course some are actually going extinct the way it appears the Yangtze River dolphin, or Baiji, has done. Or three, you can put it into the most extreme forms of poverty among our fellow humans in the world. There'll still be some people who are rich, and I'm talking money now, some people who are in the middle like many of us, and some people who are poor, but there won't be the ravages of extreme poverty. And the genie says, okay, I've got a meeting in Tibet in 20 seconds, and if I'm late, I have to bring the brownies for the next genie meeting, so I don't want to be late. You have to pick between eliminating the whole problem of global warming, stopping this wave of species extinction, or eliminating the worst ravages of extreme poverty. And you have to pick one of these. If you don't mind, how many would vote or pick stopping global warming? How many people would pick that? About three. How many would pick stopping the wave of species extinction that's going on around the world? We have three. How many would pick stopping the worst ravages of global poverty? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, it's a clear winner. Poverty wins again. Unfortunately, I picked up the wrong bottle. I had another one in my car. This is just a Diet Pepsi bottle, and it's empty, which is even worse. So we can't do this today. It'll have to be for my next trip. We don't have the genie with us today. And all of these problems are enormous and at least, if not, certainly not insoluble, but the solutions are not immediately apparent. If, however, we can find a way through purely, and I want to underline that word, purely voluntary means, to enable every woman and every couple on this planet to make their own choices. We hope they're thoughtful, informed choices, but the important thing is to make their own choices about when, whether, and how many children to have. That would go a very long way toward helping to address, over the long term, mind you, over the long term, all three of these challenges, each of which is different in kind. Now, when I talk about making their own choices, my wife works for LL Bean. She works at I live in Pennsylvania. She works at their store in Center Valley, Pennsylvania. And about 2 weeks ago, she was working as, just there, helping out the customers as he came in. And a woman came in with her children. Not her child or her 2 children. She came in with her 8 children. You may have seen her on television. Her name's Kate Gosselin. And she was doing her fall school buying. She'd just been to the Stride Rite store, and she came into LL Bean. Apparently, she doesn't have like a promotion deal with him. She just needs to buy bags for the kids, school bags. And she came in to shop, and my wife actually waited on her, and I don't know, Ms. Gosselin, I won't call her Kate, I never met her, but Ms. Gosselin said, now can you embroider or mark the names of each child on each bag so that when I'm making their lunches, I can kind of And then she said, oh, forget it. The 8 kids, I'm not making a special lunch for anybody. They're all going to get the same thing, so it doesn't really matter. Now, when my wife came home from work that day and told me about it, she said, you know, those were wonderfully well-behaved children. They really were. They were well-behaved. She seemed to have things in hand. There's a camera crew following her around, but they really weren't helping. They were just kind of doing their thing. I'm not going to make a judgment beyond that. I will simply say that in a world where I at least value human choice and pluralism and diversity and respect the rights of others, people, each of us is going to make different choices. When I spoke several days ago in York, Maine, to about 160 7th grade science students, I asked them, long song and dance, but I asked them, what's the right size for a family? And a couple of hands said, well, 3 children. Somebody else said, well, 2 children. And the next one said, well, there's no right answer. It depends on that family. What's right for one family isn't right for another. The good news from my point of view, and I have a point of view, is that in every society on earth, and I know of no exception to this, where women have the freedom to make their own choices in conjunction with their partner. But let me say parenthetically, I don't think any woman on earth should ever have to depend on winning the spouse lottery to decide what happens with her body. I hope she does, but if she doesn't, it's her body, not his. In any event, whenever women have an array of choices and have an awareness of the possibilities and the ability to afford those choices, they always, talking societally minded, there's always going to be folks like Kate Gosselin who make a different choice than most of us. Most Americans have 2 children on average. That's the average for this country. Most women will have smaller families, and most couples in any society. And in fact, in my view, this helps to address in many ways, not in every way, but in many ways, a preeminent challenge of our modern age. It took until 1800 for us to reach 1 billion humans on this planet. We were a slow starter. If you'd gone out on the African plain 20,000 years ago, you would have, if you're sort of omniscient observer, you would have been very impressed with the lions and the tigers and the crocodiles and the amazing birds. I don't know if you would have even paid attention to this funny-looking, awkward little species that's sort of hiding back in the trees, desperately trying to sort of keep its act together. We were not very impressive. Then, about 12,000 years ago, we figured out agriculture. And we were blessed with big frontal lobes, opposable thumbs, and this pretty flexible voice box. And so eventually we kind of got things started. And by 1800, literally the entirety of human life on this planet, we got to 1 billion. Then something or a set of things happened. And they were good things. And it all had to do with child survival. Modern public health, modern sanitation, modern medicine, the beginnings of ways to understand how to address infectious disease. I bet you wouldn't have to go far from this building to visit an old church. And if you went into the graveyard, into the cemetery, you'd find tiny overgrown plaques. 17 days, 3 months, 2 years. In colonial America, the average woman had 7 children. It was the family size you now see in the poorest places in Africa. And yet, population wasn't growing because 5 of those children would die. Only 2 would survive. And then, because of these miraculous and wonderful breakthroughs, human population began to grow and grow and grow. And today, basically 200 years later, there will be in about a year 7 billion of us. So we've gone from 1 billion to 7 billion in 200 years. We add another billion every 12 or 13 years. Today, and I'm not talking about migration, which is a fascinating issue in and of itself, but natural growth, by which I mean births minus deaths, is such that in the developed world, among those of us who live on the wealth plateau, and let me define wealth. I mean you have a second set of clothes back home, you have a bed to sleep in, maybe even a separate room to sleep in your family. At least not everybody eating and sleeping and living in the same room. You have a sense that if you got really sick, even if you're deprived of health insurance, you can at least go to an emergency room and get some kind of treatment. and you have a sense that probably next week you'll have something to eat. That's what I mean by the wealth plateau. There are 1 billion of us up there, and then there are 5 billion arrayed along the slope. And then, to employ some biblical language, there are 1 billion of us who live in the valley of the shadow of death. 1 out of 7 of us live on less than $1 a day. And that means, the economists figure this, it's like trying to live in Greenfield on less than $1 a day for everything. I said that in Seattle, and I used Seattle, not Greenfield. A woman raised her hand. She said, well, you're wrong. I said, okay, I've been there before. What am I wrong about? She said, well, you can't do it. And I said, do what? You can't live on less than $1 a day in Seattle. I said, you're right. And she said, well, then you're wrong. And I said, no, it's sounding like a comedy routine here. I'm right about I'm wrong. Well, I said, no, you're right. You can't live on it. She said, well, we went on. But the point was, people don't. Every day, they have to try to live on less than $1 a day. I didn't say $1 a day. I said less. 25,000 of their children die, well, worldwide, 25,000 children die every day needlessly from easily preventable causes, most of them in the poorest places on earth. None of those children die from overpopulation. Most of them die from overpopulation, by which I mean it's not the direct cause. The leading cause is waterborne disease, pathogens that cause diarrhea, that cause dehydration, that cause chemical imbalances with the electrolytes, which cause you to die. I said this to doctors at Brown University 2 days ago, and nobody said, you don't know what you're talking about. So I think I've got it right. Now, how can we fix this? Well, we could fix this by equalizing all the income in the world. That would work. I would suggest you call your congressman and suggest that America's family income right now is about $45,000. That's the mean per capita family income in this country, about $44,000, $45,000. And say, you know what, let's spread it out so that we will only have a tiny fraction of that, but people in Ethiopia will have the same. It's going to be tough to get 218 votes for that in the House of Representatives. It's going to be tough. Even your own congressman would probably say, you know, I'm all for helping folks, but I think this could, it would, oh, he said, I'm sure he would say, I can do that in my last term, because it would be. In any event, you know, you can say with accuracy that it's a distribution problem. But you know what? For those Chilean miners who are trapped underground, oxygen could be a distribution problem for them. You could say, there's plenty of oxygen on Earth, what are you complaining about? Well, distribution problems are not small problems. It's one thing to sort of fantasize about redistributing global income. It's another thing about, it's altogether different to try to figure out how to redistribute fresh potable water. If you hook an iceberg off Greenland and pull it to Africa, you'll have an ice cube. It's very difficult. So global population growth hits the poorest among us. They are the ones. They are the people in places like Niger, also called Niger in Africa, where women have an average of 7 children each. Now, I was with 7th graders in York, Maine, and I said, imagine a lot of those children die. Imagine if somebody built a wonderful hospital and had great health care and nutrition. Imagine what, and these children began to survive. What do you think their parents would do? These are 12-year-olds, I asked this question. Somebody raised their hand. I said, what do you say? Oh, they'd have smaller families because they'd know their children would survive. Well, that's a pretty insightful perspective for a 12-year-old or a 52-year-old. And that kid, can't remember if it was a boy or girl, was exactly right. When you bring down infant mortality rates, you bring down population growth rates. It almost seems paradoxical. The more children who survive, the smaller families people have. And when they have smaller families, they're able to provide more for their children so that their children have better education and better health care. And they go on to have better lives. Now, there's a wrinkle here. And the wrinkle is this. What happens when your income goes up? Now, forgive me, but I've observed that when, and there's good evidence to support the first half of this, when women's income goes up around the world, they choose smaller families. When men's income goes up around the world, they choose larger plasma TVs. Just saying, okay? Just saying. I hate to I'm not really letting men off the hook. I'm just saying that I wouldn't depend on them if I were speaking to half the world, if I were you. It hasn't always worked out that well. So, when people's income goes up, They consume more, most of us. Hopefully, and this is more hope than anything else, hopefully we're starting to get to the point where we're not necessarily wanting more stuff. I spend more time in my life trying to figure out how to get rid of stuff than I do, you know. People say, you want a free, no, I don't. I don't know what it is. I don't care if it's free or not. I don't need any free chairs or anything else. I read a book, I get done with it, except on rare occasions if I bought it, I give it to a friend or give it to the library. It seems like a better use for it. But we are the ones who are consuming the earth. We are the ones who have carbon obesity. We are the ones who are the carbon hogs of the world. We use 100 times or more, we emit 100 times or more fossil fuels than people in places like Chad, where incidentally the last figures I saw for annual per capita carbon emissions from fossil fuels were 0, because when you round it, it's so low it rounds to 0. So you say, well, wait a minute, if we manage to create the conditions with good health care and good education and good nutrition and all of those wonderful things, and people began to become more wealthy, well, wait a minute, they're going to consume more and it's going to make the carbon problem worse. Well, it will, but it kind of depends on which planet you think you're living on. You know, we're all in this together. We may not want to all be in this together, but we are. And for us to kind of move toward a future where we drive our 11th generation Priuses, wonderful thing, while a third to a half the world sweats and starves in the dark, poses 3 big problems. Ethical. I remember reading a speaker once who was asked a question, and the questioner started off by saying, ethical considerations aside, and the speaker said, I can't help you there. I can't do that. I don't know how, so you're going to have to find a better question for me. There's an ethical problem, for me at least. There is a practical problem, because guess what? People in the poorest places in Africa are just as smart as we are. They're the same species. They've got brains, they've got voice boxes, they've got opposable thumbs. If you read Guns, Germs, and Steel, great book by Jared Diamond, you can read about some of the reasons why Africa is in, you know, the prehistorical, if you read reasons why Africa is in the mess it's in. If you want to look at more recent future, it's colonialism. There are a lot of factors that have gone into this. But they're just as smart as we are, and they want decent lives for their families just as much as we do. And if they're like the rest of us, they'll fight and claw their way to a better life. And we shouldn't be betting against that. And the third problem with it, they might get annoyed when they see how we're living. You know, the trawler ships that siphoned all the cod out of the North Atlantic, you know where they are now? They're off the coast of East Africa, off places like Somalia, destroying the fishing grounds for the Somali fishermen. And guess what the Somali fishermen are doing? Imagine if you're a young person in Somalia, you walk into the room, speaking metaphorically, on career day. There's 2 tables, famine victim and pirate. Which one do you pick? I'm not endorsing piracy, by the way. Don't report that. I'm just saying that when you create untenable situations for people, people do what they have to do. So the challenge here is that we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to recognize that absent some miraculous technological breakthrough, that there probably will not be a silver bullet to solve the carbon problem. It's much more likely, and this is not my phrase, there'll be silver buckshot. There'll be hundreds and thousands of solutions that may contribute to it. But if we fail to address the problem of population growth, we can't get, they say in Maine, you can't get there from here. According to Professor Tim Dyson of the London School of Economics, if the people in the poorest places on earth in the developing world just remain at their same low to 0 level of fossil fuel emissions, but population continues to grow according to current projections, but we, in the developed world, cut our carbon footprint by 40%, which isn't all we need to do, but it's a pretty good start. By 2050, that 40% will be completely wiped out by population growth. And that's assuming the poor people don't start emitting more carbon, which they're almost certainly going to do if they manage to in any way climb out of extreme poverty. So we have to work on both problems. It's not an either or, it's a both and. Again, Jared Diamond, author of Guns, Germs, and Steel, had a piece in the New York Times a year ago where he said the following: if population growth continues on its present trajectory for another 40 years, And that's one of a number of projections, but that's a reasonable if, one of many. And if, this one isn't likely, in fact it's not going to happen, if the whole world had the US consumption levels by then, according to Jared Diamond, we would need not just another planet or another 2 planets, we would need 72 planet Earths based on current consumption levels. Now, even if you're fond of extraterrestrial travel, you're going to have to go pretty far. I mean, I guess maybe Jupiter, if we could colonize that, it's so big, that would sort of cut the number down. But I'm not sure anybody's looking to that happening anytime soon. At least nobody. Well, I do see, I've met people who think it's going to happen. It already has happened, but I'm not convinced. So we have to look at the challenges of global poverty. We have to look at the challenges of carbon. We have to look at the challenges that face threatened and endangered species. I've spoken to many scientists, and I've challenged them to tell me one species out of the thousands that are now threatened and endangered today where either the leading cause or a major contributing cause is not human population growth. They cannot name one. They cannot name one. It's not always direct. It's often we'll bring in invasive species in like that beautiful purple loosestrife we see growing in wetlands. A prettier plant I never saw. But guess what? It's the only plant you're going to see after about 3 years in that wetland because it knows how to take over the landscape and push the native species out. We are undergoing a species extinction that hasn't been seen in, 60 or 70 million years. And we don't even know how many species there are on Earth by a factor of 10. So we don't even know the scope of the problem and the scope of the damage we're doing. And again, it's human population growth, this unique modern phenomenon. So how do we fix it? If you accept the fact that maybe these aren't good things. Today, according to the best estimates I've seen, there are 218 million women on Earth who would like to postpone having another child or not to have any more children, but who cannot do so because they either cannot afford contraception or they've never heard of it. Did anybody here use a Post-it note before they were invented? I didn't think so. You know, when people invent new technologies, cell phones, garage door openers, plasma TVs, Post-it notes, birth control, all of a sudden the awareness of a new technology creates a demand for it. But there are many millions of women who've never even heard of it. So you have 218 million women. We do not have to persuade them to have smaller families, and we should never be in the business of coercing anybody. I'm just, it's my value system right there. I'm just putting it out front. But it's a moot question with them. They already want to, but they can't because if you're living on 67 cents a day, the $22 a year it costs to provide contraception to a woman in a developing world might as well be $22 million. So global population is the only problem I know of its scope for which the following 3 things are true. 1, we know how to fix it. Contraception, modern contraception came along 50 years ago with the advent of the birth control pill. If you were to, it would be an interesting exercise, make a list of the greatest technological breakthroughs of the last 1,000 years. I don't see how that couldn't be in the top 10, and it might make the top 5. I mean, it's been a busy millennium. A lot's gone on. But when you think about a technology that has the power to transform directly the lives of half the people on the planet, and has spread, even though there's much more work to be done, but has spread at an amazing speed compared to, say, the printing press at the time of Gutenberg. It's a transformative technology. So we know where babies come from. There's been a lot of research, not all of it supervised. Contraceptives work remarkably well when used as directed. They're not perfect, nothing is. But we know how to address it. Number 2, I'm not going to say it's inexpensive, I'm going to say it's cheap. Because the best numbers I see, again to repeat that number, is that it costs $22 to provide contraceptive access to a woman in the developing world per year, $22. $22 will buy you a really nice pizza with maybe some breadsticks and something to drink. And I'm not opposed to pizza or breadsticks or something to drink. But that's just by way of comparison. Every other global challenge is trillions, gazillions, millions. This one's $22 a person. And even when you multiply it out, it doesn't come up to that much money compared to almost everything else that money seems to go out to. Number three, and finally on that point, women, as I said, and to some extent men, although they're kind of slow learners, but women everywhere want it. Not because they necessarily want to have very, very small families, but they want to have a say in the matter. They want to have a choice. So we can fix this. Now, we can, but how do we do it? Let me give you an example of a country that may surprise you a bit. In fact, I'll give you two examples. I'm going to talk first about Iran. Iran is a theocracy. Iran is not a predominantly Muslim nation. It's a Muslim nation. In 1979, 1980, the leadership, the Shah, was toppled by the Ayatollah Khomeini, and religious leaders came in, took over. They were embarking on a land war with Iraq at that time. We were backing our good friend Saddam Hussein in that battle. And the leadership, the Shah had started some family planning programs, but they weren't that far along. The leaders said, well, we want lots of children because we need soldiers for this land army because we have to fight Iraq. And by 1985, the average woman in Iran was having somewhere between 6.5 and 6.8 children. It's hard to pin down the number any closer than that. 6.5 to 6.8 children. Well, in 1985, Khomeini went to his reward, whatever that may have been. A new Ayatollah came in, and, pardon me, I'm going to sneeze. By the way, I just met earlier this week with a doctor who put out a great little video called Why Don't We Do It in Our Sleeves, pointing out that it is the most healthful and sanitary way. He's an ENT specialist, to sneeze into your sleeve. It's the healthy way to do it. It just looks gross, but it actually is the most healthy way to avoid spread of disease. Keep that in mind. And he did this as a sideline, and he ended up selling 46,000 copies of his CD, and ended up doing a good deed and making a lot of money off it. Anyway, and I'm hoping to talk to him about doing a little film on population. Anyway, back to Iran. We're done with sneezing, I hope. Well, in 1985, the leaders, the theocracy here, they said, we have to do something about it. It's going to destroy our country socially, politically, environmentally. So you might think, well, they went in and they came up with coercive policy. No, they didn't. They did 5 things. First, they built a condom factory. Here's a thought. 2, they dramatically increased university enrollment for women. 2/3 of the university students in Iran are women. No, I don't carry a brief for the Iranian government. I don't much care for it from what I've read. I'm just reporting the facts here about what they did for their own reasons in their own country. Dramatically increased university enrollment because they figured out if women have more education, they have more options. They're more likely to perhaps choose a different blend of when to have children, how many to have, and all of that, because they have vistas and careers open to them that would not otherwise be the case. Number 3, they use television and radio with public service ads to promote family planning. Number 4, and this is a great one, it's the only country I know of in which, in order to get a marriage license, and you don't cohabit in Iran, it doesn't happen. You want to live with somebody of the opposite sex, you get yourself a marriage license. In order to get that license in Iran, you have to take a course in family planning. It's a little like saying before you go out and get behind the wheel of a car in the rain at night on I-91, you might want to know what those funny rubbery pedals on the floor do. So you have to take the course. I don't know what happens to people who flunk, it's like summer school or something, but anyway, you have to take the course. But 5th, and most importantly, the religious leaders in Iran put out a series of pronouncements saying that tranquility is an Islamic virtue and that small families are more tranquil. And without taking a side here, I would venture that you could walk in blindfolded into any house anywhere in the world at 5 p.m. and pretty much tell within 5 minutes if there are any kids there. Kids are wonderful, but I would not associate the word tranquility with lots of children. It's just they're wonderful for other reasons. But if you're looking to make money or have immediate tranquility, there are other ways to do it. In any event, so they did these 5 things. And again, to repeat myself, what they did not do was coercive activities. I've met with an OBGYN who practices in Iran, and she has assured me no coercion, and the data backs that up. Well, in 16 years, that's less than a traditional generation, they went from somewhere upwards of north of 6.5 children to 2 in 16 years. And they've actually now gone to about 1.8. 16 years. Through education, access to contraception, and sending out the kind of cultural signals that said this was a good thing. Now, my other example that I want to use for a moment is Mexico, and then I'll make one more point and stop and get a little discussion. Mexico, our neighbor to the south. 6.8 children in 1970. 6.8 children. The government realized they had a problem. Mexico is a heavily Catholic country, but they have a very strong tradition of separation of church and state, which I hope their neighbor to the north will keep in mind. And what they did was they started literacy programs in the 70s. We provided family planning assistance to Mexico. They set up a network of family planning clinics, and they have first-rate, top to bottom, no exceptions, comprehensive sex education that leaves nothing to the imagination. And as a parent of now grown children, I can say, when you leave something to an adolescent's imagination, they will imagine something. Better you get there first with the facts. You're just better off that way. Well, that's what they did in Mexico. Well, you know, we don't give any family planning aid to Mexico anymore. And the reason we don't, they don't need it anymore. You know what they call it? They've graduated. Because from 1970, where they had 6.8 children, today they have 2.2, which is very close to replacement rate. A couple has 2 children. The Wall Street Journal a couple of years had a front page article saying to American business, don't expect that supply of cheap labor from Mexico to last forever, because guess what? And they gave an example of a couple who had each come from a large family, who'd had 1 child, and they were saving up so she could go to college and be an engineer. You know, that 1 child with an engineering degree is not going to want to come across, legally or otherwise, in the United States and wash dishes. We're going to have to figure out another way to wash our dishes and pick our crops and make the beds in the motels. We have to figure out another way. Maybe from another country, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe we'll have bed-making technology by then. In any event, or maybe Americans will suddenly get up one day and want to make their own motel beds. Who knows? In any event, it's amazing how fast you can transform societies. This is one of those rare circumstances where you can just add money only a little and it makes a difference. Our budget under George Bush for family planning was about $461 million, with an M, $million a year. $461 million would buy you about 5 or 6 of the nicest public high schools you ever saw. And don't get me wrong, I think we need great public high schools. But at the same time, bear in mind that $461 million is spread over dozens and dozens of scores of countries. So it's a lot of money, it's not much money. It would have been a lot less if Bush had had his way, but there were senators who just said to him no. Senators like Olympia Snowe and Susan Collins and a number of people of the other party as well, who stood up and prevented even worse damage. Since the new administration came into office, and I'm just reporting the facts as the numbers are, there's been a 40% increase in funds for international family planning. We've reversed a lot of the damage. I don't know what the future holds. I don't have a crystal ball. Ask me on November 3rd or 4th, and I can give you a pretty good guess as to where things will go over the next couple of years. But the United States has returned to its position of leadership here. We're saving millions of lives. We're averting millions of abortions. You'd think everybody'd be on board because there are serious differences of opinion in this country about abortion. But you'd think everybody'd be on board because in the history of the world, no woman ever had an abortion who wasn't pregnant. You'd think everybody would be on with this, but they're not. So we know how to fix this. We know what needs to be done. Now, we've done focus groups with, I won't say average people, we actually went to the people who show up. The world is run by the people who show up. So we did groups of people, the people who show up at meetings like this, who show up at city council meetings, who show up to do the hard work in schools and synagogues and all the other places that people need people in the community. And we actually invited people who sort of agreed with us, who were what we call pro-choice. And when we asked them the following, we put some statements before them. And one of the statements we put said, the United States has a responsibility to help people around the world with this. They said, no, we don't. You know, since when did we become responsible for every single problem everywhere in the world? However, when you said to them, we have an opportunity to help people help themselves. We have an opportunity to invest a little bit of money, which is, we don't have to transform the lives of women around the world. Gloria Felt, who used to be the head of the Planned Parenthood, tells a wonderful story about visiting a family planning clinic in rural Mexico. And a woman came in who wasn't 20 years old yet, several children in tow. And she was there for the first time to find out about birth control. And as Gloria Felt tells a story, she could watch a revolution happening in that woman's eyes. Because suddenly, for the first time, she realized there might be another life. besides the honorable and important job of being a parent, but that she did not have to face a life of being pregnant every 17 to 24 months and watching her children die and watching them go hungry and watching her life slip away. You know, this is one global problem. If we go at it intelligently and if we stress voluntary programs in all cases, and if we're sensitive to the needs of local cultures and we listen to local people, we can check this one off the to-do list. And believe me, the list will still be long. We're not going to run out of problems. I don't know how to solve the carbon problem. I don't know how to solve the grander scope of the species extinction problem. I do not know how to solve, although I think we can address, the problem of global poverty. I don't know how to just fix it. But this one we can fix. And just as in our history as a country, we have addressed successfully a handful of other questions. We've addressed slavery in this country, and we fixed it. In the 20th century, we made enormous progress around suffrage. When you look at from the 1900 to 2000, first for women, then for blacks, and then toward the end of the century, we made enormous progress with the rights of gay, lesbians, and others. Well, this is a century where we can do a lot to solve the survivability and the sustainability problem. And we don't need to know more than we already do, although that's always good. We need to do what we know. And so with that, I'll stop. I think we have 10 minutes for some questions and comments and other points of view, and I welcome it. Thank you.